Hello everyone. Today we're going to be doing a new chapter of The Tactical Guide to Women, 9 Critical Risk Management Questions. And so I'll jump right into that. A fundamental objective in romance is to find someone we can trust. It's very important to make this point. I think there are a lot of people who do not understand this point. I think there are a lot of people who get into relationships with other people based on lust or sexual appeal or with women, there's a stereotype of women, seeking monetary gain or material compensation for their relationship. I know some women do that, not all women, but the thing that I notice is that if you can't trust your partner, you don't have a solid relationship. And I'm not the only person who's observed this. Everybody observes this. Could you guys stop with the acrobatics? They've been going at it for a while. This is like my 5th take of this video. All right, but anyway, trust, very, very big in a relationship. You don't have trust, you don't have a solid relationship. Portions of the brain associated with anxiety that showed increased activity during the honeymoon phase give way to increased activity in areas associated with calmness and pain suppression. Our brains calm down about the relationship and reach a state of pleasant relaxation. That's when the truths and subtleties of her personality will reveal themselves. There's a lot there. So earlier he mentioned that the honeymoon phase lasts about 12 to 18 months. So you have a lot of anxiety during the honeymoon phase. You've got a lot of arousal, sexual arousal, lots of anxiety, lots of just, you're really weighing up this other person and deciding whether or not you want to hold on to this relationship, whether they're interested in holding on to the relationship. Oh my God, I hope they're interested in holding on to the relationship because I want them to hold into the relationship. There's a lot of just this a lot of information going back and forth. And of course, you're just doused in all sorts of amazing, wonderful, oh my God, I feel so good kinds of chemicals. The honeymoon phase is awesome. It is a wild ride, it is fun, and it is definitely a good time. But when the honeymoon phase ends, I've seen people who seem to think that's a bad thing. It's like, oh, it goes away. Yeah, it goes away. I wish it didn't go away. I wish it lasted forever, but then I'd never get anything done because I'd be so absorbed in my husband that I'd never get anything done. And God knows how we take care of kids. It would be like, could you just go away? We want to have some time alone together. It doesn't last forever. And when it kind of starts to die down and go away, there's a few points that he mentions here. Number one, the anxiety that you feel during the honeymoon phase, the oh my God, I hope he likes me too, is replaced with this sense of calmness and peace and pain suppression, which is really interesting. In my marriage, there have been several points at which I've been in pretty extreme pain. I nearly died that one time, and I had the ectopic pregnancy, and that was pretty excruciating. And then there have been even yesterday. So yesterday I was talking about the whole, trans thing with my husband, which was something I was very anxious about because I didn't know how he'd respond to it. I didn't realize how tied up in knots I was. And when the two of us talked and he was very accepting of me, it felt like this huge weight had been lifted off my chest. Like I felt so loved. I felt so comforted. I felt so secure. I gave him a big hug and I held on to him because it was like I felt so much better. And there have been so many times in my life where I've been either in excruciating physical pain or just in extreme emotional pain, and I've gone to him and I've gotten this wonderful sense of comfort and relief and calm just being with him. And we're not in the honeymoon phase anymore, but that's a big deal. The amount of pain suppression you can get from a loved one is not to be underestimated. As a person who's been in a lot of pain, I can say. And the other point, of course, is when she relaxes around you, when she's not on her best behavior around you, trying to impress you, trying to see whether or not she can keep you, that's when she might start to let herself go a little bit. That's when the facade starts to slip away. If there was anything that she was hiding from you, that's when you're going to see it, and that's not always going to be the case. With my husband and I, we got to know each other. We went into our honeymoon phase. There was nothing hiding behind the facade. It was just kind of like, oh my gosh, I want to know everything about you and you want to know everything about me, and we kind of just got to know each other. But say there's something that somebody has that they know is not really a good thing. Say they have a tendency to be really, really unpleasant to be around. They're going to kind of reel that back because they know that people don't like them being rude, hypercritical, condescending, abusive, verbally, you know, any of these things. That's going to start to come out after the honeymoon phase. So don't jump into like a long-term relationship with someone and then, you know, start signing over like your future to them until you've gotten past that 2-year window. Actually, it's a year and a half, but 2 years is a good 2 years is a good window, because then you get through the honeymoon phase and you have 6 months afterward to just kind of observe. It's 3 a.m. You're wide awake in bed with your partner, but nothing good is happening. For hours now, you've been discussing your relationship. You desperately want to sleep, but each time you think the conversation is drawing to an end, she reignites the conflict. Bleary-eyed and exhausted, the 6 a.m. alarm looming over ever closer, you try to remember why she's unhappy, but your mind is in a fog. These conversations are destroying your focus at work, not to mention your happiness. You'll be lucky if you can muster the energy to hit the gym after work tomorrow. You're becoming depressed and overweight, and your boss is noticing that you've lost your spark. I thought this was interesting because I've seen guys who've gotten into relationships with women where the women just... they're monsters. Like, I don't know a better way to say it. It's like they're constantly harping on them. Well, what do you mean about that? Like, I remember there was this girl, and she wanted to date me. Like, she really wanted to date me. She was very, she was not subtle about it. And I didn't have that many opportunities with women, so I probably should have jumped on that opportunity, and I didn't. And the reason I didn't is because back when we were just hanging out, before things, you know, started taking a romantic turn, she showed me this text that this guy she was dating had sent to her. And it was basically, she was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to go do this. And he was like, okay. And she's like, what does that mean? And I'm like, what do you mean, what does that mean? It's okay. She's like, yeah, but what does it mean? Like, what does he mean by okay? And I'm like, I think he means okay. That right there, I looked at it, was like, do I want to get into a relationship with a woman who does that, who's like nitpicking every single little word I say and trying to find like a subtle meaning underneath it? Because I'm a very blunt person. I am not socially subtle. I am not emotionally subtle. I just kind of say whatever's on my mind, and I have an amazing ability to put my foot directly into my mouth. Yeah, there is no, if I say okay, it means okay. It doesn't mean okay, but here's the layer underneath it that you don't see. Like, women do that shit, and this is the reason that, like, said this a lot, women are fun to sleep with, and I like sleeping with women, but I don't want to be in a long-term relationship with a woman because I've seen too much of that stuff. And I mean, it's very common. Not all women are gonna do that. And so he spends this portion of the chapter right here talking about how to avoid getting into a relationship like that. Because nobody wants to deal with that. Nobody wants to deal with that. Reliable doesn't mean perfect. She will have bad moments just like you. The point is, she has far more good moments than bad, and she works on increasing her skills. That's an important thing to note. I think there are people in the Manosphere sometimes, I could be wrong, I could be reading it wrong, but I think that sometimes guys in the Manosphere have this idea that women are supposed to have like this perfect track record with them, and the moment they make a mistake, it's like, whoop, kick her to the curb, she's no good. Women make mistakes just like men make mistakes. Human beings make mistakes. Are you human? You're gonna make mistakes. There's a caveat. It's possible that her unreliable communication skills are the natural outcome of the way you interact with her. Couples have a natural tendency to engage in what psychologists call overclaiming. That's when we take too much credit for the good that we bring to a situation and too little credit for the bad. As the authors of one study put it, group members cannot be responsible for more than 100% of the group's output, yet claims of responsibility routinely sum to more than 100%. Important thing to note, especially if you are in a relationship and you haven't dealt with your own baggage, you could be kind of sabotaging your own relationship. So it might be that she's a good woman and you need to work on you. This is why the first like half of the book is about, hey, work on you first. You really need to do that. That's very important. A lot of guys, like in the Manosphere, it's very easy to be like, oh, you know, women are the problem. If you don't work on you first, you could be sabotaging yourself. Always be aware of that. Always keep an eye to that. Am I sabotaging this relationship? Am I sabotaging our communication? What kind of a role am I playing in this problem that I'm facing right now? The more personal responsibility you take for your problems and your mistakes, the more in control you're going to feel of your own life. I think I've said that only 100 or so times. So, I mean, I'm sorry for the broken record thing, but I'm doing it. There's one quality that stands out among all the high conflict couples I've met. At some point, they stopped trying to understand each other. They speak at each other rather than with each other. They're like two people with bullhorns, impervious to each other's messages. It's exhausting to watch, and it must be miserable to participate in. That sounds horrible. Like, if you're in a situation where you're talking with the other person and you're not listening to them, and they're not listening to you, there's no point. There's no point in continuing to talk. And he's saying that this is a problem in high conflict couples. So the first thing you need to do there is be aware of whether or not you're listening to your partner. You know, the first sphere of control you have over a situation is yourself. And so you always sit there and ask yourself, am I actually listening to what she's saying? But you also want to make sure that she's listening to you. Like, communication is a two-way street. So communication's important. I know that's such a woman thing to say. Like, everybody, and this is the stereotype with women. Like, men are in the Manosphere constantly complaining, like, oh, women are always talking about communication, but they don't really want communication. We do, but I don't think women are always very good at communicating what communication is. And honestly, I think he touches on that in this book too. It's not, tell me all about your feelings and just info dump on me. It's much more, are we getting ideas across to one another? Because you can talk for hours and not communicate. Are we getting information to go from me to you and then back again? Like, are we doing that? Are we successfully doing that? That's communication. That's the important part. A word of caution. The inquisitive person will be the first to notice patterns. It won't escape her attention if miscommunication or any other pattern becomes habitual. You'll need to be clear, consistent, and honest, because her openness to facts and reality will give her uncommon clarity. I'm a very distrustful person. I'm probably going to talk about that a lot in future videos because it becomes an issue for me. I am extremely distrustful. This is the reason that I don't think therapy works for me. I'm too distrustful to actually open up to my therapists, I think. I think that's part of the problem. I'll be the first to say that's part of the problem. Maybe I've just had a bunch of shitty therapists. The last one, I'm done. I'm never doing that again. But I have serious trust issues. And when I met my husband, serious trust issues. Like, I didn't trust anybody. I was a lone wolf. I was on my own. I knew that I couldn't show me and my inner workings to anybody. Hi, cat. I could not. Hi, cat. I could not open up to anyone. And when I met my husband, I think one of the most alarming things about realizing that I was attracted to him, realizing I was developing feelings for him, was this realization that I actually felt a sense of trust for him. And that's happened to me about 3 times in my life. And the first one was with my husband, and the second one was a really, really good friend of mine that I still occasionally have coffee with. And the third time was with someone I met recently, and it was kind of scary for me because, like, I trusted them, and I was very cautious of that. I'm distrustful of myself when I trust people because I'm that distrustful. Lovely, just lovely. But when I met my husband, I remember I watched him very, very closely. Everything he told me, all of it, every word. And this goes back to the honeymoon phase and that heightened anxiety. I was like terrified. I listened to everything he told me and I cataloged it all and I checked it constantly for inconsistencies, any inconsistencies whatsoever. And the better I got to know him, the more I did this, because my husband, when I first met him, he looked way too good to be true. He was not a normal guy. I had never met a guy like him before, and I kept on thinking, okay, what's the catch? Is he lying to me? You know, he'd tell me stories about his travels in Greece, or stories about playing, you know, the organ, or stories about being an actor, or stories about working in a funeral home, or stories about just anything. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, this guy's only been alive for 26 years. How the hell did he get the opportunity to do all this shit? There must be an inconsistency. I gotta watch this guy. I gotta be careful, because he could just be lying. He could just be telling me tall tales because he thinks sooner or later that's gonna get him into my pants, and I'm not that dumb. And so I'm watching him, and I'm watching as all his stories check out. All his stories are consistent. Every story nests neatly into the other stories he's telling me. And after a while, it gets to the point where it's like, oh my God, I think he's telling me the truth. Who is this guy? Women do this. Like, people do this. You should be doing this. If she's telling you a bunch of stories and you're noticing that something doesn't quite seem right, watch that thing. Pay attention. That's a good thing to do. I'm not saying be paranoid, because I'm a little on the paranoid side, but, you know, watch the person. Watch them. See what they're doing. Are they being consistent? If she's paying attention to you and you're being inconsistent, she will notice that you are lying to her. Just saying. An overly pliant woman who bends to your will is practically guaranteed to resent you at some point, possibly in the distant future, after you've built a life together and the stakes are high. In the Manosphere, I see a lot of guys who kind of put this insistence on women being in their sphere, which I think is important. I think there is a certain tendency for women to really appreciate a man who's in charge, who knows where he's going, who knows what he's doing, and who isn't going to be dissuaded from his goals. That's important. But I think a lot of guys don't necessarily realize that a woman shouldn't be a sex doll with a pulse. You know, that's important. That's something I think is really neglected in the Manosphere. You want a fully developed human being, and a fully developed human being, she's going to have opinions of her own sometimes. An assertive woman makes life easy because her honesty keeps guesswork and resentment to a minimum. You'll always know where you stand with her. You can combine your goals and dreams with hers, secure in the knowledge that she isn't stashing discontent to unload on you down the road. Yeah, all that. And the honesty part is really important. Again, going back to you need to find someone that you trust in a relationship, you need to find someone you can trust. If she says, okay, you want to do this, that sounds like a good idea, you need to be able to trust her to actually be agreeing with you and not just doing the human doormat, I'm just going to go along with everything you say thing. Because that's not good. She needs to be assertive enough to say, I want this and I don't want this. And, you know, you two need to have mutually held goals. But they need to be real goals. They can't just be goals that she's going along with because you said, I'm going here, and she doesn't have a clear enough sense of her own self or her own ideas, goals, and ambitions to be like, oh, hey, I really don't want to go there. Important. If she's resilient, meaning she has a full toolbox of these coping skills, then you'll notice it in small ways. You don't need to wait for a big life challenge to test her mettle. You'll see her resilience in the way she handles life's minor difficulties. So I talked about this a little bit before. On my first romantic date with my husband, like we'd been hanging out for a month before that, we were best friends, like all we ever did was talk to each other, but on our first romantic date, we had a total condom failure. And I just looked at it, it was like we realized condom didn't work out the way we hoped it would, and I looked at my husband and I was like, oh, well, morning after pill. And he was impressed, and I found this out later, he was impressed that I wasn't freaking out, going, oh my God, the condom didn't work, you know, anything like that. I just looked like, oh, okay, morning after pill. I don't like taking hormonal birth control, but I do believe that the morning after pill has a place sometimes. Like, personally, I've taken it a few times when there's been, for example, on this occasion, a condom failure. You know, I think that's kind of important. Do you mind, sir? Like, excuse me? And so, like, that next morning, we went out and got the morning after pill, and, I took it, and he was sitting right there, so he saw me taking it. Which honestly is good practice. At the time I didn't think about it, but that's actually good practice. Like, you want to know that she actually took the pill instead of being like, oh yeah, honey, don't worry about it, I took the pill. I don't trust women anymore. Like, it's bad, and some women are completely trustworthy, but as a good general practice, be cautious. That's just good advice. I've heard enough horror stories. You've probably heard some horror stories. Always, caution's a good thing. Just sit there with her. Hold her hand while she takes the pill. It's okay, honey, I'm right here with you. Then horrible that I feel like I have to give that advice, but I've seen too many stories. I've heard too many stories. I've seen too many things in this world. Like, I have male friends who are really, really attractive young men who have bright futures in front of them, and they mess around with women who are like, oh, well, I'll just get pregnant, and that way I can, steer your boat for you. And it's like, don't let a woman like that anywhere near your penis, and don't trust her ever. Like, I don't care how good this sex is, do not trust a woman like that. Because you have a bright future, because you have plenty of opportunities, because you're young and the world is your oyster and you can build a beautiful life for yourself. Do not let that bitch tie you down. You guys know that. I'm preaching to the choir. But going back to the resilience thing, he was impressed that I wasn't freaking out. Now, I looked at it like, sooner or later, I do want this man to get me pregnant. If it's sooner, that's not a problem for me. So I really wasn't freaked out. But he looked at it and was like, okay, she's handling this well. She's handling problems well. She doesn't freak out over the little things. This is a good thing. So he was, again, gathering information about me, and I was learning about him. For example, I realized that the idea of having his kids did not faze me in the least. I kind of liked it. In fact, I really liked it. I think this is a good idea. 4 kids later, I still think this was a good idea. The resilient woman won't pout, rage, or fall apart, at least not for long. She won't proceed from the absurd idea that life should be fair, nor will she give up and wait for someone else to put her life back in order. Okay, 3 things here that are very important to note. Number 1, the resilient woman might still pout or rage. Like, we are human, women are human, we still occasionally have meltdowns. Like, oh my god, I just hit my wall, especially during pregnancy. Oh my god, those hormones are horrible. And then it's like, I just lost it. And I've seen some very amusing stories online from women who were pregnant who lost their shit over the dumbest things. And just lost it, started crying, just completely lost their cool because, I remember one time there was a woman, I can't remember exactly the story, but I guess she got distracted taking care of her toddler while she was pregnant with her second kid, came back into the room and realized that the cat had stolen her hot dog off the table and run off with it. And she just lost it because it was like, I'm hungry, I don't feel good, my body's all out of whack, I just wanted this hot dog, and the cat stole the hot dog. It's like, actually it was a corn dog. It was a corn dog. Women will occasionally lose their shit. Item number 2, the absurd idea that life should be fair. I hate this, and I see it so much in the world today, both from men and from women. Life should be fair. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to tell you life is not one goddamn bit fair. No, I'm sorry, no. And maybe that's something that I should be thankful for, because one of my earliest lessons in life is, guess what? Life's not fair. Now go suffer some more. Yes, I have a lot of scars. Yes, I'm all fucked up, but oh my god, I'm resilient and I understand life isn't fair and unfair things are going to happen to me, and that's okay. I don't like this notion that everything should be fair, because no matter what you do, it's never ever going to be fair. Accepting that, learning to live with that, moving on beyond that point, really important. More people should do that. I think the world would be a better place. Point number 3, nor will she give up and wait for someone else to put her life in order. No, no, you don't want someone who's habitually helpless. That's just not a good thing. No one is coming to save you. And that was another one of the lessons that I learned really, really early in life. I learned that one a lot. No one is coming to save you. And this is something that's not exclusive to women. My alcoholic coworker that I had to sign the sexual harassment claim against, before he started getting creepy and sexual with me, he would tell me, about his problems with women, and I'd be sympathetic, and I'd be like, dude, I think I finally just straight up told him at one point, no one is going to come and save you from yourself. And if I didn't say those exact words, I paraphrased. But as psychology professor Joyce Benenson has pointed out, social scientists miss some evidence. For example, while researchers typically assume women enjoy closer relationships with each other than men, the physical closeness of men during sports, travels, or even war may surpass the deepest conversations between women in terms of intimacy. God, I wish I was a man sometimes. He's talking about this idea that women are more socially skilled than men, more close than men, more tight-knit than men. And I don't always know where this idea comes from. I don't always get it. I think it was this book, but it might have been a different book that was talking about how when men sweat, they secrete pheromones that cause them to bond with other men and work more cohesively as a team. And I thought that was just beautiful. And it's like, again, I little jealousy here, just saying, little jealousy here. I look at the way women are socially and I immediately become very distrustful, which is a prejudice of mine. But I've seen the backstabbing, I've seen the henpecking, I've seen the scrambling for social hierarchy. Women look placid on the surface, and they are brutal under the surface. Women are at war with each other, and we're not physically strong enough to just duke it out and punch each other a couple times and then be like, okay, fine, you win. We have to constantly be subverting one another. We have to constantly be watching our backs around one another. We have to constantly be jockeying for position with one another. It's exhausting, and I don't have the time for that shit, which is why I tend not to have that many friends. At least not female friends. And I'm not the only woman who goes through that situation where it's like, you know what, I'd rather just hang around with men. Screw this. I don't want to deal with women because women are too difficult to maneuver around, and it's not worth my time, and it's not worth my energy. Men, on the other hand, they do have, sports, travel, warfare, I would say working situations. I've watched men work together at a manual labor job, and I mean, this is me, I will admit, but I sit there and I just kind of look at them and go, there's such a beautiful sense of camaraderie here. God, I wish I was a dude, which ties into other videos that I've posted recently, which is why I'm saying it. But still, I am envious of men for this sense of teamwork, camaraderie, brotherhood. I do not get that around women. I think it's something a lot of mainstream people fail to notice. Men aren't like women, and they don't communicate like women, and they don't act like women. But that doesn't mean that they don't have this deep sense of brotherhood that develops. It's really powerful. It's really beautiful. Women don't generally do that sort of thing to be cruel. Rather, this behavior is generally an attempt to solve problems. They're more prone to notice overarching themes and threats to the relationship. Sometimes when we men are arguing about what's happening here and now, women are arguing about the theme behind the here and now, including prior incidents that shape the theme. I am very guilty of this. I noticed just one example just recently. My husband had his brain tumor. So for a long time, 5 years, he had this brain tumor, and he was constantly saying, things are going to get better. I'm just really stressed out right now, but I'm going to work hard on it, and things are going to get better, and we're going to get better. Everything's going to be better. Don't worry. I mean, I'm really, really going to fix it this time. And I would believe him for a little while, and then he'd start kind of not being able to hold it up. Like he couldn't fix things for more than a week or two, and then everything would go right back to the way it was. And I noticed this again and again and again, over the course of 5 years. And so the brain tumor, it caused a lot of changes in him. One of them was that he gained a lot of weight. The brain tumor caused him to gain weight. He became obese, and it was not a fun thing to see because he was my partner. I loved him and I cared about him. I was like, you need to get into shape. You need to get into shape. He's like, I will work on it. I will exercise. I will really focus on my diet, and I'm going to get this under control. And then, a week or two later, he'd slipped right back into the same old pattern. And so we find out it's a brain tumor. He starts taking a magic little pill. It makes the brain tumor go away. Life gets monumentally better, but I was in a depression by that point because of dealing with these issues for 5 years. I was in this huge depression, and I hated his guts. I hated him. And I was deeply resentful because the resentment started building up. I think the resentment started forming in the first year, and then as the years went by, I stopped paying attention to it. It just became this background noise in my life, like I really resent my husband. That's not good. That's bad. And I'm like, you need to get back into shape. And we're having marital problems, and we're going to marriage counseling, and we're trying to get everything back on track because our lives have been just completely upended by this brain tumor. And I'm constantly harping on him, like, you need to get back into shape, you need to eat healthy, you need to take care of yourself. And so he's feeling awful because I'm harping on him about his weight gain. And at some point, he finally started getting back into shape. He started walking because that was pretty much all he could do. And he actually injured himself walking because he was so out of shape and he'd been so sedentary for so long. But he kept it up. He got back up. He started walking again, having more energy because exercise gives you a little more energy. And that gave him a little bit more energy to start eating healthy and watching what he was eating. And that gave him a little bit more energy to start walking more. And then he started counting his steps. And so at some point, and by this point I was on antidepressants, I was taking some medication for some of the problems I've been having that were related to the brain tumor, let's just be honest. And I looked at him one day and I saw him, and he was walking and he was talking on the phone with a coworker, and his eyes were bright, and he just had that spark back. And it was like, okay, he's going to be okay. He's actually doing it this time. It's real. He's not just doing it for a couple weeks and then diving back down into the depression. He's actually taking care of his health. And so recently my husband's been complaining. He's like, he's still overweight. And he's upset about it. He's really frustrated because there was this milestone he's been trying to meet, and he's been plateauing and not quite getting to the milestone. And he complains about it to me. He's like, you're not going to want me anymore because I'm still overweight. And I'm like, dude, I don't care. I don't care that you're overweight. He's like, yes, you do. I was like, no, I really don't care. You're exercising. You're eating healthy, you're monitoring your vitals. I don't care how much you weigh. You're taking care of it. You're taking care of your health. For me, it was the overarching theme. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you breaking yourself out of this pattern of, oh, I'm going to be okay, things are going to get better, and then just not? You're clearly maintaining a level of activity. You're clearly working on it consistently. Consistency is all I want. I just want consistency. I don't care how fast you lose the weight. I just want consistency, and I want effort. And as long as I know that that's happening, I don't care. I don't care. I love you. Doesn't matter. We're good. You're good. It's okay. Women are like this. It's not always a bad thing. It's irritating. It's annoying. I know it's annoying. I know I was being annoying. But there was a reason for it. I just cared. And I was seeing this pattern that he'd been carrying on for 5 years, and it's like, you gotta break that pattern. I will not be able to relax around you until you break the pattern. He broke the pattern. We're good now. I love him. Everything's okay. Everything's okay. To protect your future and your happiness, you'll want to know that she respects your masculinity and your individuality. He goes on to talk about how you know these things, how you can assess these things. It's a good book. It's a great book on relationships for men. Definitely buy this book, especially if you're a young man and you're single and you're looking for a partner. Buy this book. I'm not being paid to say this. It's important that she respects your masculinity and your individuality. It's important. It's very important. Enough said. Small acts of kindness, displays of respect and affection, and a willingness to forgive one's spouse his or her faults and failings. Generous couples give these little gifts to each other freely and abundantly. One of the things that my dad taught me, and he never said a word to me about it. It was one of the things I observed about my parents, and it was a thing that my father did that I learned from watching my parents. Now, my parents screwed up in a lot of ways. They're human beings screw up. But one thing that they did for me that is absolutely brilliant and gorgeous, and I will be forever grateful to them, they modeled to me an extremely loving marital relationship. They were very monogamous, they were very loving, they were very devoted to each other, and I saw that growing up. And it taught me so much that I just take for granted. This is the template that I use for relationships in my head. And I take it for granted, all these little things that I learned from them and observed from them growing up in my formative years. Huge, huge gift to me that they gave me. Huge. Because now I'm married and I'm with somebody that I love, that I want to maintain a relationship with. And I have all these little behaviors that were modeled for me as I was growing up that I now just automatically mimic. There are so many things that could have gone wrong that I didn't have to deal with because my parents modeled these behaviors for me. And one of the behaviors is something my dad did all the time for my mom. He would get up before her and he would make a hot cup of coffee, one for him, one for her. And he would go to her while she was still kind of sleepy, and he'd, kind of tap her and say, hey, if you want to get up, I have a fresh pot of coffee. I've got a cup of coffee waiting for you. Just poured it. Why don't you come out to the living room and the two of us can sit and hang out and talk for a little while and drink some coffee. And this simple act of just giving her a fresh cup of coffee in the morning. He did that every day. He still does it. He still does it even to this day. Like, I call them up and they're like having their coffee and it's like, oh yeah, you got your coffee that you're having together. I grew up with this. I grew up seeing this. I grew up as a little kid knowing that if I woke up early enough in the morning, I would see mom and dad sitting in the living room having their cup of coffee together. And this was their ritual. And when I got together with my husband, I started making him coffee. Because it was a ritual that I observed with them that I thought was important that I bring to my relationship with my husband. I don't think even to this day I fully appreciate how valuable that behavior is. Because getting a cup of coffee for your partner, it's a very simple way to tell another person, I love you, I care about you, you're important to me, I think about you. All these messages. You can say the words, but it's a lot easier, a lot simpler, and a lot more direct to just take a small, simple action and communicate it through an action. As they say, actions speak louder than words. This is a perfect way to do it. A small gesture. It doesn't have to be a cup of coffee. Not everybody likes coffee, but you get the idea. Small gestures make a huge difference. Yes? I am running out of time. The little people are getting restless. If you've heard women are less violent than men, don't believe it. About 8% of male domestic violence victims, compared to 4% of women, were shot at, stabbed, or hit with a weapon between 2002 and 2011. I have known way too many men who have been in abusive relationships with women. Too many men. Way too many men. And it's not okay. And there is a lot of emphasis in our society about female victims of domestic abuse. And I understand why, because women are smaller and we're more easily physically damaged. And so when there is a case of domestic abuse where the man punches the woman, that woman is generally going to take a lot more physical damage just because she's more fragile physically. However, I have known men who have been abused by women. I knew one guy, I dated him, and his ex-girlfriend, right before me, broke his ribs. She could have killed him. She nearly did kill him. And she got away with it because she was a woman. And because, honestly, the officer on duty, he knew something was up and asked him, like, do you want to press charges? And he said no. So that's on him. He should have pressed charges. But some people are used to abuse, and that's not a good thing. But yeah, I dated him right after her, and he was a mess. Like, he was abusive at that point because he thought, you know, women are all horrible and I'm just going to take my revenge. And so he took his revenge on me. Lovely, lovely. But yeah, no, he was badly abused. If you guys have ever seen my video about the Brad Pitt guy, the Brad Pitt doppelganger, that guy was abused. There is no reason he should have been treated the way he was treated. It was not right, it was not fair, and it was not okay. I probably should have spoken up sooner, and I regret that I didn't. He'd been beaten up, he had a black eye, I'd seen him bloodied by this woman. It was not okay, and I should have... I felt like I was in a bad position in that situation. Like, I look back on it, it's like, you don't ever want to be that woman who goes to another woman's boyfriend and says, hey, you shouldn't be dating her, because then it looks like you're trying to, like, steal her boyfriend. If I had a penis, that wouldn't be a problem. Here are a few warning signs to take seriously. Forgive me if they seem obvious to you. I need to list them because they aren't always obvious to someone who has become accustomed to abuse. That might even include a buddy or a family member of yours. Yeah, people who have been abused don't always realize that they're being abused. Be aware of that. If you have somebody in your life, male or female, who is being treated in an abusive manner, they might not clue into it. Now, usually it's a sign they've been victimized before. I was sitting there thinking, well, abuse doesn't always start like really, really vividly. Usually it's very subtle, and then it builds, and then it builds. And the person who's being abusive, they're observing. What can I get away with? What can't I get away with? They might not be consciously even observing that. They might just be saying, well, I got away with it this time, so then I can get away with it again. But people who fall for that have probably been abused. So you have to be aware, you have to be sensitive, you have to be caring. It's difficult to deal with a person who's being abused. If you notice someone that you care about being abused, I recommend doing some research. I recommend looking into maybe some helplines. I'm sure there's stuff out there. Google it. Because you can't just say, oh, you know, that person's bad for you, get away from them. Sometimes you can, but sometimes it's delicate. It's something that's delicate. I could make so many videos on victims of abuse and how to handle victims of abuse. There's a lot of information I don't know about it. That's why I'm saying Google it, do your research. But be aware that people in your life that you care about, male or female, can be in an abusive relationship and they might not necessarily even know. So, you know, be sensitive. And then again, there are those people who are paranoid who are like, you're in an abusive relationship. And it's like, no, you just don't like my partner and you think my partner's abusive because in my case, when I had that situation, he wanted to be with me instead. And so he kept on describing everything my partner was doing as abusive. And I thought, no. Some men also accept abusive relationships because it's all they've ever seen or known. If that describes you, then you've got a bit of relearning to do. Therapy helps, as does a community of good, successful men who can provide the examples your role models should have, and who can keep you anchored to a useful mindset about women. Yeah, I think men need community. I think that's important. I think women need community too. I think our society as a whole needs more community. We're all glued to our phones. We're all interacting over the internet. We're all separated from each other, and a sense of community, of face-to-face interaction with each other, very, very important, and it's something that our society is desperately lacking. And that's not good. It's not healthy, and we're seeing the fallout from it everywhere. The lack of community is affecting everything, and it's bad. I have to go make sure that a little person doesn't choke on his ham cubes, and I'll talk to you guys later.